week 4 of the fantasy football season. His running back sits every matchup this week. Arizona Cardinals at the Seahawks Thursday night. So now James Conner out for the season with the ankle injury, and Trey Benson got a lot of hype in training camp. Now he's going to step in as the starting running back for this Arizona Cardinal team. So the workload's going to be there. The volume's going to be there. Mari DiMercado, the backup running back, but we've seen him get opportunities the last couple seasons on and off. He hasn't done much. So Benson a start in a decent matchup at Seattle because of the volume, and DiMercado, he'll work in on some third downs and be the backup back, but obviously he's not going to have much upside. He's a sit. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, both starts. Kenneth Walker last week found the end zone twice, which saved his day. Yards per carry weren't great at all. 16 for 38 it was for Kenneth Walker. And him and Charbonnet, it's going to be a 50-50 split. And Charbonnet, he practiced in full on Monday, so it's looking like it's a good sign he plays in this game, where Charbonnet's more of the short yardage, goal line back, more physical in between the tackles. And it's a 50-50 split over there in Seattle. But I think both these running backs could have good fantasy value versus the Cardinals this week in their starts, especially if Charbonnet plays. Obviously, Minnesota Vikings at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jordan Mason, we saw last season when he was the starter for the Niners when CMC was out the early part of the season. And last week we saw him go out there, have a monster ball game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. So this week a tough matchup versus Steelers in Dublin. But Jordan Mason, the volume's going to be there. I liked him even before Aaron Jones went down with injury, where he out-touched him in carries. And Jordan Mason, he's just a big physical back. They traded for him a couple draft picks, even though they were late rounders, and they gave him a contract extension as well. So they're fully behind Mason, and this is his backfield. I think even when Aaron Jones returns, he's a start even in a tougher matchup. Jalen Warren a start. Warren, he could do it all out of the backfield. I thought Caleb Johnson, he was going to be in a committee worst case with Warren, but Johnson hasn't seen the field. Kenneth Gainwell's been a change of pace back, even though he did vulture a goal line touchdown. But this week in a matchup versus a leaky Viking defense up front at times, Jalen Warren's a start. Kenneth Gainwell will sit. New Orleans Saints at the Buffalo Bills. Alvin Kamara, he still goes out there. He's still going to make plays. Obviously, his ceiling isn't that high, where teams are loading the box and forcing Spencer Rattler to beat him in the air. And also, they've been trailing a lot of games, even though we know Alvin Kamara over the last few years has been one of the best PPR running backs. So this week at Buffalo, where they're going to be chasing points and throwing a lot, I think Kamara will work his way into volume. James Cook will start each and every week. Last season, some people thought it was fluky. He led the league in rushing touchdowns, and he's picked up where he left off last year. James Cook, pretty much anywhere from 15, 20 points per week he's putting up. And this week versus a bad defense of New Orleans, he's going to have a big game, I believe. Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. Tony Pollard to start. I know the numbers haven't been great, yards per carry, and also he's not really catching the football out of the backfield, but the volume is almost second to none in this league for Tony Pollard. I know they're trailing every game this season is Tennessee, but Pollard's still getting 15, 20 touches per week. Tajay Spears, he's going to be out at least another week or two for this Titan team, and this could be a grinded out close game between these division rivals. He's a start. Nick Chubb, a fringe option. I just don't think the ceiling's high for Nick Chubb. Obviously, he's not going to catch the football out of the backfield. He definitely lost his step, but rightfully so, coming off a major knee injury last season with the Browns. And also, like I said, this team's offensive line isn't great blocking in the run game. So with those factors, he's a fringe option. Woody Marks is sit. But I think Woody Marks, as the year goes on, if Joe Mixon doesn't return, is going to have a bigger role in this offense. But right now, he's third down and passing downs back, and occasionally get a couple touches in between the tackles as Marks, but he's a sit. Cleveland Browns at the Lions. Quinshon Judkins, off the field problems he had. Barely was in training camp, didn't sign his rookie deal. And then once he was cleared and the NFL's investigation was over, he got right on the field in week 2 and now already the starter over there, which obviously was the plan all at training camp before some of these things came up with Quinshon Judkins. So this week, even in a tougher matchup at the Lions, he's a start. Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford barely saw the field in last week's ball game in the upset victory versus the Green Bay Packers. And right now, it's a Judkins backfield, and he looks like the better back, and he had a lot of talent in college, and they took him in the second round for a reason. Obviously, it was this Brown team, so he's a start, and Sampson and Ford phased out a little bit are guys you can't trust the sits. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, I've said it a lot, arguably the best 1-2 tandem backfield in all pro football, and last week they both went out there and had monster ball games in the great victory at the Baltimore Ravens. Gibbs, 67 yards, found the end zone on the ground. They did 5 catches, 29 yards, and David Montgomery exploded in that ball game for 151 yards on the ground, and he found the end zone. So this week in a matchup, even versus a good defense of the Cleveland Browns, these two running backs, you put them in your lineup. Washington Commanders at the Atlanta Falcons. Ja'Cory Croskett-Merritt last week found the end zone. Even though I don't think his ceiling's that high as Croskett-Merritt, even in a good matchup, you don't catch the football out of the backfield. He's not getting a crazy amount of touches in the backfield as well, where Christian Rodriguez actually out-touched him in terms of carries. And also Jerry McNichols looked like the best back out of all three, where he had a monster 60-yard run, breaking multiple tackles, like a Marshawn Lynch type of run, and into the end zone. So Croskett-Merritt, I would give him the start in this one because he'll get some goal line work, obviously, and first looks at touching the football. McNichols and Christian Rodriguez, guys to keep an eye on, definitely own in 12-team leagues or deeper. And like I said, McNichols coming off the big run, 4 for 78 and a touchdown. But like I said, just the volume isn't there. And they're unknown running backs as well, where we haven't seen much out of them. So they're both sits. Bijan Robinson locked in weekly. Even with the poor play of Michael Penix, he's still going to go out there. Still going to get his numbers as Bijan Robinson. And this week in an okay matchup versus the Commanders, a must-start. Tyler Algier, a couple weeks ago, he had a big game as the backup running back at the Minnesota Vikings. And then last week, they got blown out 30-0, barely touched the football. He's nothing more than a great handcuff to stash on your roster or sit. Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Saquon Barkley, not obviously on the pace was like he was last season, but still one of the elite backs in all fantasy football and pro football. And this week in a matchup where this could be a track meet between these two teams, I think Barkley has one of his better games of the season early on here. He's a must-start. Bucky Irvin a start. Could do it all out of the backfield, break tackles in between the tackles, even though he's a smaller back, and catch the football out of the backfield, which is a good thing as well with Bucky Irvin. So last season, he came out of nowhere where he was a 4th-round pick for this Buck team, took over the starting job. And this week, even in a matchup versus a good defense of the Philadelphia Eagles, he's a star. We saw Kyren Williams have good success last week. We saw in week 1, Javonte Williams have a good game versus defense. So I think you could run on them. Rachaad White last week, he didn't touch the football much. 5 carries, 12 yards. He's a good handcuffed option, Rachaad White. And also he's on a contract season as well, where I don't think they're going to play him a whole lot. Sporadically, he'll get some series where he's going to touch the football. But besides that, I don't think White has much upside. He's nothing more than a good handcuff as well. Chuba Hubbard to start. He's been solid for this Panther team now over the last season and changes Chuba Hubbard. And this week, it's a pretty decent matchup at the Patriots, where I don't think their defense is that great versus the run. And this could be a grinded-out game between these two teams, where they're a little bit similar than you would think. Rico Dottle was hit last week. I know he found the end zone, but that was garbage time. Rico Dottle, I know last year as well, had 1,000 yards with the Dallas Cowboys. But this week in New England, where it's going to be a close game, where they could be down, blown out Carolina, I don't think Dottle sees the field much to be an option this week. Trevion Henderson, a fringe option. Ramondre Stevenson, 2 bad fumbles last week, including one at the goal line. And then after that, Trevion Henderson pretty much saw the field the rest of the way. So Henderson, we know he's explosive, could kick return if they needed him to. Good receiver out of the backfield. And another guy, if he hits that second level, he's gone. But this week, I just don't know how to touch it for all these running backs, where there's 3 guys getting touches in this backfield for New England. And Ramondre Stevenson, like I said, he had a big week too, no doubt about it, with 21 fantasy points in PPR leagues in Miami. And then last week, he didn't do anything. The 2 fumbles did him in. And Antonio Gibson as well. He's nothing more than a veteran back that's going to get a few touches here and there. Los Angeles Chargers at the New York Giants. Omarion Hampton, it's totally his backfield now. Najee Harris tore the Achilles in last week's ball game versus the Denver Broncos. And Hampton, he had a coming-out party where the first 2 weeks he was barely touching the football. And last week, his full arsenal was on display, catching the football out of the backfield, over 50 yards receiving, running in between the tackles, finding the end zone. And this week in a great matchup at the New York Giants, he's a must-start. Cam Scatterbo a start. Tyrone Tracy dislocated the shoulder. He's going to miss a few weeks. And Cam Scatterbo, he's a physical running back. We saw him run over a lot of guys in last week's game. He's not scared of the contact. He looks for it, lowering that shoulder. And also, he could catch that football out of the backfield, where he had 6 receptions in that ball game. So we'll see if it's Russell Wilson again or the rookie Jackson Dart, which I think the Giants at this point 0-3. you might as well throw the rookie out there and see what he has. And Cam Scatterbo, like I said, volume's going to be there with Tracy out. I know they got Devin Singletary, but he's at the latter part of his career. And with this Giant team already 0-3, you want to see what Scatterbo could do. And last week, he put it on full display versus the Chiefs. Jacksonville Jaguars at the 49ers. Travis Etienne start. He's off to a hot start for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But I think the numbers are going to drop off a little bit for Etienne. And this week, even in a matchup where Nick Bosa is out for the season with a torn ACL, I'm not expecting a big game out of Etienne, but anywhere from your 10, 15 fantasy points at best in PPR leagues. Bashal Tutin, obviously now the backup after Tank Bigsby got traded a few weeks ago to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know he found the end zone 2 weeks in a row as well as Bashal Tutin, but he's been a touchdown-dependent backup running back. And obviously that's not a recipe for success to count on that as a fantasy owner unless you have no other options. Christian McCaffrey, like I said, coming into the year, as long as he's healthy, we know he's a top 1 to 3 running back in fantasy football. And this week in a great matchup versus the Jaguars, he could be the number 1 back this week. Indianapolis Colts at the Rams. Jonathan Taylor off to a monster start. This Colt team 3-0. When they got a quarterback and an offensive system that they know what they're going to do and not try to go out of the boundaries of it, this is the upside of Jonathan Taylor. We saw the last couple of years he's been up and down with Anthony Richardson, but so far this year with Daniel Jones back there on the center, this offense has been more traditional, and Taylor's putting up numbers, especially last week, a 3-touchdown performance at the Titans. So must start even in a tougher matchup at the Rams. Kyren Williams a start. Kyren Williams, he just goes out there and he puts up his numbers week in and week out as Kyren Williams. It's not flashy. I know he's one of the smaller starting backs in all pro football, but this guy, he's elusive in between the tackles. And also the other thing as well, he's a smaller back where he knows how to hide behind his offensive lineman, and then he hits that hole and he gets his gain. So this week in a matchup, even versus a pretty stout D at times, is Indianapolis. He's a must-start. Blake Corum a sit. One of the better handcuff running backs in the league, no doubt about it, is Blake Corum, but he's not a guy you're going to put in your starting lineup, just someone to stash on your bench and see if his touches go up a little bit as the weeks go on. Chicago Bears at the Raiders. DeAndre Swift to start. Swift in this Ben Johnson offense weekly, he's picking up the playbook more and he's putting up more numbers. And last week had a good game versus the Dallas Cowboys. And this week in a matchup with a defense that can't stop anyone, he's a nice start. Kyle Monangai, he's getting into this offense a little bit more over the last 2 weeks. And we know Ben Johnson, he likes to operate with 2 backs, where he was the coordinator with the Lions with Gibbs and Montgomery, and now trying to do that a little bit here with the Bears. But obviously Swift, Monangai, they're not anywhere close to obviously a Gibbs and Montgomery backfield. Ashton Jeanty is start, but I'm starting to get a little weary of Ashton Jeanty right now. He's not following his block as well. I know this offensive line isn't great, but he's looking to just run over guys instead of being patient and hitting the hole and then starting to run over and break tackles as Ashton Jeanty. So the first 3 weeks haven't been good for Ashton Jeanty. Week 1, he bailed his day out with a touchdown, but his yards per carry were down. Week 2 versus the Chargers, they were trailing all game. He didn't do much, and he's not much of a receiver out of the backfield as well. And then week 3, 1 or 2 drives were good for him, but the numbers still underwhelming. So this week, if he can't get much done against the Bears, he's going to definitely drop down rankings and possibly even be a fringe option. Baltimore Ravens at the Chiefs, a matchup of these 2 AFC teams that have been battling for years in the playoffs and trying to get to the Super Bowl, with obviously the Chiefs coming out on top. Derrick Henry is start, but he's had fumble issues this season, is Derrick Henry. And week 2, we got bottled up versus the Browns, 11 carries, 23 yards. And then last week, if he didn't have that 26-yard touchdown, Henry, he didn't do much. And like I said, he had a bad fumble in the fourth quarter that cost him 3 points. So Derrick Henry, still a stud running back in my opinion, but maybe Father Time is starting to catch up to him a little bit. Where I said it last season, obviously it didn't happen, had the monster year. I said it this season, where he was at 7th, 8th ranked running back for me coming into the year. And so far we've seen some problems with Henry with the fumbling, which hasn't been an issue for him. And the last 2 games, especially 3, if he didn't score a touchdown versus the Lions, it was a nothing game. Now to the Chiefs, Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, both these running backs 50-50 split, and it's just a backfield you don't really want a part of. Both these guys really don't have much upside, not much receiving out of the backfield from both of them as well. And this week it's a tougher matchup versus the Ravens, even though I know Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery shredded them for over 200 yards combined between these two running backs. But Pacheco and Hunter sits. Green Bay Packers at the Cowboys Sunday night. Josh Jacobs to start. I know last week he didn't do much. Cleveland Browns went out there. They put in a good effort. They stopped Jacobs in that game. But this week it's a great matchup with the Cowboys. They can't stop anyone. You want to throw on Dallas? You could throw on Dallas. You want to run over 100 yards on the ground versus Dallas? You could do that. So this week, Jacobs, a running back, I think is going to have a good week. Javonte Williams is a start. Javonte's been great with this Dallas Cowboy team. And a lot of people have wrote him off going into the year, saying the Cowboys just signed him instead of going out there trying to get a real-time running back or drafted one in the NFL draft. But Williams, he's proved the doubters wrong so far. He's only 25 years old. And I've said this in other videos. Maybe it just took him a little bit longer to get 100% coming off the ACL injury now 2 seasons ago. So this week, even in a tough matchup versus a good Green Bay defense, he's going to get a lot of touches. And especially with CeeDee Lamb out now 2 to 4 weeks with the high ankle sprain, I think they're going to try to run a little bit more. And we know Williams could catch the football out of the backfield. Miles Sanders is sit. He's getting about 8-9 touches per game as Miles Sanders. He even found the end zone last week as well for this Cowboy team at the Chicago Bears. But obviously with his touches limited and a tough matchup versus the Packers, he's a sit. And now the first of 2 Monday nights, New York Jets at the Miami Dolphins. Breece Hall will start. I know the last 2 weeks the numbers are down for Breece Hall, no doubt about it. But this Dolphin defense can't stop anyone. We saw James Cook just shred him in last week's ball game. Was this Dolphin team, and we saw Ramondre Stevenson in week 2 have a big game versus defense as well. So running backs are going out there, having good games in the early going, and Breece Hall, I think, bounces back this week. He's a start. Braylon Allen is sit. If he's not getting a goal line touchdown, he's not going to have value as Braylon Allen. He's a short yardage back, not much of a pass catcher out of the backfield, and he's taken a little bit of a backseat the last couple weeks as well, where in week 1 he had a good game. Devon Achane, in my opinion, one of the top backs in all fantasy football, 15 points a minimum. It seems like he's going to put up weekly in PPR leagues. So this week in a matchup versus Jet defense that can't stop anyone, he's a start, and one of the best receiving backs out of the backfield as well. Ollie Gordon is sit, but definitely someone to own in 12-team leagues or deeper is Ollie Gordon, because they're trying to add that physical back now into this backfield and short yardage guy, where Gordon could wear you out a little bit, and then obviously Achane coming in with the finesse and the game-breaking ability. But this week versus the Jets, Gordon, have to see a little bit more out of him. He's a sit. Like I said, Cincinnati Bengals and Broncos to cap off the week. Chase Brown to start. I know last week was a disaster for him and the offense as a whole. 10 carries, 3 yards for Chase Brown. But this week at Denver, they've had trouble all season long, believe it or not, is this unit versus the run. Week 1, Tony Pollard had a decent ball game versus them. Week 2, Jonathan Taylor had a big game versus them. And then week 3, Amarian Hampton had his coming out party. He was the rookie versus defense. So Chase Brown, no competition over there. Samaje Perine banged up, even though he might play in week 4. So he's a start for me. J.K. Dobbins a start. He's a solid veteran, is J.K. Dobbins. No matter where he goes, he's going to put up numbers. But obviously injuries mid-season or late season like last year have done him in his NFL career as J.K. Dobbins. But obviously Sean Payton likes the veteran running back. Last couple weeks, he's gone out there. He's put up points. I know he's a touchdown-dependent back where you don't do much in the receiving game, catching the football as Dobbins, but he's definitely someone who's going out there getting his 15, 17 touches a game, and he's been productive, and we know this Bengal defense isn't that good. And R.J. Harvey, a sit, I think as the year goes on, he's going to work more into this offense. The second-round pick is R.J. Harvey, good receiving back out of the backfield, but right now J.K. Dobbins is healthy and playing good, and Harvey's just a change of pace, an occasional drive back. So that's running back start sit every matchup for week 4 of the fantasy football season.